A lot of times in the morning, I think about what my homily is going to be for the day, and especially at daily Mass, because it's very early in the morning at 7 a.m., I'll be thinking about it maybe as I'm getting ready and preparing and getting dressed, etc., to leave the house. On a recent morning, I was there shaving and thinking about my homily, and I cut my face. I, kind of went a little bit awry with the razor and kind of made a little mark there or whatever. And I came over here for Mass, and someone said to me, well, Father, what happened? And I said, well, I was thinking about my homily, and I cut my face. And they said, well, Father, maybe it would have been better for you to think about your face and cut your homily. So tonight, I'm going to get right to the point. The gospel has two basic parts to it. The first being about faith and an increase in faith, and that it really just takes a small amount of faith to be an incredible disciple of Christ. It just takes a small amount of faith to be able to do miraculous things and to be able to have a belief in God that surpasses our human imagination. And he was trying to instill this in the disciples because they were questioning him. He had challenged them for chapters before this in Luke. Luke starts in chapter 11 where Jesus challenged them about material possessions and challenged them about forgiving others. And they said, well, I don't know if I can do this or not. I need more faith. But Jesus said, don't worry. It can be just a small amount of faith to do incredible things, that God is powerful. And belief in God can make huge differences in our lives. So the second part of the gospel really tells a story that doesn't seem very related. It's almost like disjointed, about this servant who was out in the field, and then he was asked to come in. And, two different ways of asking him to do what he needed, and that was to prepare dinner. And we might say, well, for that servant, he was a servant of the master. So there were, at that time, some servants who worked in the field and some who worked in the house. So this person was kind of going above and beyond, but really, he still worked for the same master. So the master is saying, and Jesus' point is, do what you're expected to do. Do the basics. And there's a certain amount of basics that go along with being a faith-filled person. And we have to know what those basics are in order to be able to be a disciple. And one of those basics, to bring this down to our level today, one of the basics is that about life. It is that about respecting the dignity of the human person and respecting the gift of life in our faith. And that is life physically, that is life emotionally, it is life spiritually. So often we talk about the poor, and the Pope recently has spoken quite a bit about the poor. We have to remember that the poor are not only those who are poor materially, but also there's a lot of poverty spiritually. And how is it that we are able to reconcile that in order to become rich in faith? And that comes from, I think, a respect of the basics, a respect of life. That when God breathed life into all of creation, and if we go to the Genesis story, we can see that in the basics of our faith, that after every day that God created, of the days of creation there in the first book of Genesis and second, afterward he said it was good. So we respect creation, but we also respect the highest form of all creation, and that is the human person. And by respecting the human person, isn't that really building a civilization and a culture of life of which God will very much smile down upon each of us? And that means a culture of life that begins at conception. It means a culture of life that respects the beauty of the younger generation and the older generation. It is a culture of life that respects how, yes, when we come into the world, there is great joy, but when we naturally go out of the world, there also can be incredible joy. When we die a natural death, not one that is assisted by artificial means, There is great joy because we are reborn into everlasting life. One of the great concerns, I believe, of our current culture is we've lost a lot of that respect for life. And that especially comes out almost every night when you listen to the news. It's almost depressing when you look at the news and you see the acts of violence that are done today. And I don't think it's about gun control. I think it's more so about respecting life. And that means not the person maybe who is ill, who sets himself on fire there in, Washington yesterday, doesn't respect his own life, no less the life of those around him. Person who drives their car into gates at the White House. Person who goes to the Navy Yard. In just one city in the last 2 weeks, there's been incredible destruction and a lack of respect for the basics of life. And if we could only respect the person maybe who is ill or inclined and care in a personal manner for people who maybe are inclined to do things that are not rational. Because, folks, it's not rational to take another person's life. Whether it be the life that we cannot see in the womb, or whether it be the life of one who is, seeking a better life in a new country, and we respect, obviously, the immigrant. This week, too, how sad, 200 people died on a boat trying to get out of Libya into an island in the Mediterranean. How very, very sad. And, there was questioned, was every effort made to save those 200 people, or were they left to die because, they weren't from that particular country? Every life is precious. Every life has value and has dignity. And so how is it that we, through our example as disciples, ensure that life is respected? It's about how we treat one another leaving the parking lot. It's about looking into the eyes of the person who's working for minimum wage at the fast food restaurant, and we give them kindness. That's like the basic level of it. And then maybe we can talk about how we treat the bigger issues of life and death. But it's just that attitude of a culture of life that is respected. And part of that life also involves an invitation to reconciliation when offenses are taken against it, because we're not perfect. It is an invitation to come to God and increase faith through the gift of forgiveness. And how is it that we are able as people to look at the past and see what we need mercy and love for in order to see the future? And my friends, it is a future filled with great and incredible hope. Because every life, every person is precious. Even the person who's sitting on death row, who is about to be, really murdered in some way through capital punishment, that person may have value. We don't know what goes on in their mind. We don't know what happens in their life of conversion. But there's hope for that life, and maybe that purpose of that life is for prayer. Maybe that purpose of this life, we don't have that ability to just take someone else's life, because every life is sacred. It is from God. It is life that has a plan. It is life that has a future. And the blessing of faith is that maybe someone determines that life is over on this earth because someone else takes that life. But certainly it also means that God will welcome that life home to the kingdom.